You're listening to episode 184 of the Tennis Files podcast on how to get unstuck with special guest Kevin Garlington. Hey everyone, this is Mirban. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Really happy that you're tuning in for this one. And we've got a great episode for you today with Coach Kevin Garlington. He is currently the head tennis pro at Cedar Ridge Country Club, but you may recognize Kevin's name from Total Tennis Domination. It's very interesting where he created a great instructional tennis website and YouTube channel and so forth. But then he actually went and joined my friend Ian Westermann and their team, or his team at Essential Tennis. But now he is back working on Total Tennis Domination as well as being a head tennis pro at Cedar Ridge. So it's really cool to see him come full circle, so to speak. And Kevin is a great player as well. He played D1 tennis and even played the pro circuit in the US and Spain. And Kevin's wife, Megan, is also an excellent tennis player and coach as well. And she works with him. And I think they've pretty much always worked with each other. So that's really, really cool as well. And Kevin has been on a couple of my tennis summits. So a really great one today about how to get unstuck. A lot of you may feel like you've been at 3-0 or 3-5 for a long time and you're not really sure how to improve yourself and get to that next level, which is what we're all seeking to do. But this episode is here for you to help you figure out the next steps and what you can do and the keys to really break through and get through to that next NTRP level or whatever next level it is that you're trying to get to. All right, so with that intro, I will now get to it for you. So without further ado, here is my interview with Coach Kevin Garlington. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. It's really exciting for me to have Kevin Garlington on the show. He's a great friend of the tennis community, and I really always enjoy, speaking with him. I've had him on tennis summits before, and he's really a wealth of knowledge, and he's on an exciting new path, and in some ways, rekindling of path. But Kevin, really want to welcome you on the show, and thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. Awesome to hang out with you again. We always have a good time, so.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. Some people that you interview and talk to, and you just feel like it's really fun to just chat and talk about tennis and other things. So that's definitely Kevin. So, actually, how has life been, since, I guess last year and early this year? How has everything been for you?
Pretty good. I just to give everybody kind of context. I don't know if, in the last probably 4 years, really quick summary, and then you come back and touch up wherever you want to go. Being in Tulsa, Oklahoma, working with a lot of high-end juniors, then probably about 3 years ago, we moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to be a part of the ET or Essential Tennis team. Had a really cool experience up there. And then we had this other opportunity that opened up for us to come back to Oklahoma, and that's been phenomenal. In the sense of we've got a chance to work with people that really, really want to improve their tennis. And it's just adults that want to kind of come out and go, teach me, feed me knowledge. So that's been super exciting for us. Personally, we've been super kind of just excited about just being back in Oklahoma. We had some kind of personal troubles with our son, but other than that, he's had found out about kidney disease when we first got here, but he's doing good, running around, getting into trouble, not letting anything stop him. But other than that, we've been really lucky with everything. Yeah.
Very, very nice, Kevin. Yeah. You were with the Essential Tennis team, Ian Westermann, obviously. A lot of people know about him. What is one thing that we may not know about Ian?
One thing that you may not know about Ian. He is a hardcore introvert.
Ooh.
You see him on probably videos and stuff, but yeah, Ian is and I am too. It's kind of probably the weirdest thing. I joke around, and on camera you have this I'm just I don't know. I think on camera it's because sometimes maybe there's no one around. I'm just but definitely we're both introverts. But yeah, he's definitely like, he has his zone out moments where it's like, Ian,
where you at?
Like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, no,
That's cool. I can,
but yeah,
sorry,
go ahead. No, I was going to say, yeah, definitely. Really cool experience being up there with him. Really cool guy. We had in the last 3 years, produced a lot of videos. But yeah, I think we learned a lot from one another about different things on tennis. So that was really a fun experience. And not only myself, my wife, who is also helping with Total Tennis Domination. Now which he didn't know, we both worked in kind of junior high development or top high performance for almost like 14 years. And so when I was doing my videos with Total Tennis Domination, he wasn't actually aware that sometimes I'm in communication with a lot. As they've gone through their life, they've had their kids. So that experience is absolutely amazing. Even the experience of Oral Roberts, definitely different. Going there, I didn't know a lot about Oral Roberts when I first went there. I don't know how much you know, but it's I always got this question when I first got my scholarship to Oral Roberts, and people were like, "Are you going to be a preacher?" And I remember talking to somebody, and I was like, "What do you mean? I got a tennis scholarship." It's like, "I know, but are you going to like be a preacher?" I'm like, no. And so by the third or fourth time, I started realizing like, okay, I probably need to do a little bit more research. But it was a really cool experience going there. My roommate was my doubles partner, so we really got along. And he's from Guatemala, and so yeah, just that experience was really cool. And then to give complete context, it was like I started late, I trained hard, I went to actually a smaller NAIA school first, so it wasn't completely Division I, and I transferred, and that gave me a lot of experience because at that time, I don't think it's now, at that time, NAIA would allow like basically grown men to come like after they played the pro circuit and come play at other schools. So like we play guys who are like Davis Cup players from like Ecuador or something, like just crazy. And you walk on the court and you're like, dude, this guy's got a full beard and he looks like he's like 30. And I was like 20 or 19 at that time, but cool experience. And it's just like, again, at school, it's like just finding whatever you can to work on and grinding away with it. And I would just get so caught up in like trying to improve. Sometimes I wouldn't worry about the results as much. And so when I did that enough, it slowly came. But hint for me, probably my biggest growth. Coach used to joke when I was a kid, is like he was like, you would invent ways to lose a match. He was this big burly like Ukrainian guy, and he's like, Kevin, you would invent ways to lose a match. And I was like, oh, but I just didn't understand. And it's like, I think that's where my passion is, especially hopefully it comes out through my teaching. It's like to get people to understand in a simple way, because like coming up was like, I was like, I didn't connect the dots of like what I was trying to do. It's just like hit the ball. And so I think that in itself has helped me become a better player and a better coach.
Yeah. Super interesting. Substantive question, but also like a tiny step back of like, I was just curious, like, with the preacher comment, is that because the Oral Roberts is like, is it like
it's
very religious?
Christian school. Okay, yeah, very religious, very Christian. Like, I remember showing up there and it was like, quick story. My coach didn't let me know in all the rules and stuff. And so there was like a dress code. And I was like, what? There's a dress code and like a curfew? But definitely different if you just didn't know what I was getting myself into. But again, it's one of those things where sometimes being uncomfortable with the situation, not knowing, and then adjusting to it helps you develop that skill of kind of constantly adjust to different situations.
Definitely, Kevin. So here's the other follow-up is you mentioned that kind of noting, I guess other people's skills that you can apply to your game. So what were some of those things that you had written down and then implemented in your game that you can remember?
That I can remember. Wow.
I know it was just a few years ago, so
Yeah. I wish you're nice. You're sweet. That's right. Starting to really understand that, I think one of the big breakthroughs is realizing that one of the things I started implementing, how could I describe this? Managing my own mistakes and kind of realizing that it's okay to lose points if you're playing the right type of point and someone hits a really good shot. And it was almost like, for me, it was this weird sensation of like, I'm not doing anything, but I'm winning points. And so what that meant was like, maybe just going cross court longer and not trying to go down a line. If I'm on the run and someone's putting pressure on me, making them hit an extra volley or an extra ball. And just starting to win matches where it's like, I don't feel like I'm having to go for winners or go for big shots as much. And realizing and having that kind of like, whoa, in the back of your head, realize like, you can be. And so my personal game style, my personality on the court is aggressive. So it's like learning to tone that or take that back a notch to give myself a chance to win points instead of almost forcing the issue and creating too many mistakes where I would cause myself more grief than I needed to.
Gotcha. That's really good stuff, man. Really good stuff. So at some point, obviously you decided to not pursue but keep pursuing a pro career. So, how did you come to that decision? And then how tough was it?
Oh, brutal. I was in Spain and I was playing and training and stuff. And it's just realizing, how many good players are out there. I mean, I was playing a tournament where it was like, I think like, what's his name? Fernando Vicente used to be like a top 20 player, top 30 player. His twin brother was playing a tournament and just toying with people. Like, I mean, he's saying drop shots off of like returns and just walking away. I mean, he was just that much better than everybody else. And you kind of like, man, he would do the same to me. But it was just that as I started playing more international, you just saw droves and droves of guys that weren't even trying to go pro, just really good. And the factor of just like staying out there. I mean, if you really want to make it, you have to be able to stay out there, which means finances. You have to be able to stay out there and travel. I was getting better, but not at the rate that my kind of like financial burn was sustainable. Cause I was pretty much doing it on my own. I come back and work for a little bit, go out and train, or go out and play. And then it's just, those two didn't match up long enough. And so I think one of the big things for a tennis player, especially if you play college tennis or a lot of juniors college tennis, it becomes a really big portion of your identity. And you almost feel like, what am I going to do without tennis? Like you're out there and like trying to, play futures and maybe challengers, but it's like, dude, you're like 30. Okay? You gotta let go. But yeah, it comes to that realization. It's like, okay, you're not going to be on TV playing tennis, but it doesn't take away from the feeling or the importance of you playing tennis. You can still have a purpose within tennis without having it be that I'm ranked such and such in the world or whatnot. And I think that was a length of time where I had to learn that, because it was like your self-worth almost gets caught up in like, what's your ranking compared to like, hey, regardless of my ranking, I enjoy playing tennis. And this is something that's fun for me. And it doesn't have to be that I have to be the best player in the world to enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, that's really huge. I remember speaking, very recently, I'm trying to remember the guest that I had. But we talked about just the mental game. And one of the biggest problems is that, we as players, we like, if we lose, and that's like, just, it's like we're a worse person because we just because we lost. A tennis match. So I think that's something that people have to look out for sure. So in regards to, I kind of want to switch to like adult development and talk about that, because that's obviously really huge in terms of the subject of this, but also there's so many adult players out there. USTA, they want to get that exponential growth, like we talk about. These players, they're 3.5, they want to make 4.5, but they're not able to. It takes them such a long time. So, I mean, first off, why do adult players tend to stagnate or improve very slowly over time?
I think it stems from the sequence of how they start learning. A lot of times, if I'm just looking at this from like a technical perspective, and a lot of times I think adults usually, and I would say the format is like you go out, you take a group lesson, and you go out and they're like, hey, make a tee and get your racket back. and then you learn to kind of like swing with your arm. And so you kind of get caught up in a little bit of, and this is just a kind of one stage of it, at least I think about it. They get caught up in like, oh, I'm going to swing my arm, but they don't learn the rest of the technique, like how to use your body. So usually the problem with that, kind of the dirty problem with this, is that you can make balls. If you're a 2-5, you're 3-0, and you're just kind of poking balls out, and if you can poke enough balls in, you're like, man, I'm winning. But then you hit 3-5, and you're like, whoa, they got a little bit more pace on the ball.
Right.
Whoa, they can do more things, and me poking the ball is not working. So it's like, okay. And so they never learn to kind of like use their body to generate pace. They never learn how to those fundamental things. And I think for me, the difference between like if you work with a junior and you have this vision for them, or if they want to go to college, or you have to iron out those things in the beginning. You can't just let a junior player kind of go out and poke balls, and maybe he wins at 12s, but then he's going to get crushed at like 16s and 18s. You're just going to laugh at him. But I don't think that perspective is taken enough in adults. And so in the beginning, it's like, hey, yeah, you're poking, you're having fun, but then you get trapped between that 3-0, 3-5 area. And if you're lucky, you got to be, I would think, a really good athlete to kind of crack 4-0, but it's really hard to do there just kind of poking the ball. Or you wind up with these big, massive, weird techniques, like I call it homebrew tennis. And so I think there's just a big thing where adults don't learn those core fundamentals. But those core fundamentals catch up with them later. And so a lot of people just get stuck there. And then what they try to do is like patch over like cool tricks, like, I'm going to do this tip. And it's like, yeah, you're doing that tip, but the rest of everything isn't working to even let that tip happen. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest things of kind of coming back and working day in, day out with adults. It's like, actually, it's been super fun to kind of go, oh, shoot, like you're not even like using your body, or you're not doing this and this, and then show them how to do that and watch their face light up and go, why hasn't anyone shown me this before? But yeah, I think that's the difference of why certain players get stuck. And it's like this long, like we talk to players like, I've been a 3-5 for like 5 years. It's like I came up and they just hit that point, and I watch them play. I'm like, oh, okay, I understand. And they have a lot of these fundamental kind of flaws. And then the players, it's even harder because now they have something to lose if they're going to make changes. And so you get to that like 4-0 level, and like, hey, you know what? You could have a great serve if you just adjust your grip this much. And they're like, but I get it. I totally get it, because I was working with a student the other day, and he was like, hey, Kevin, I watched a video of myself serving, and like my arm's not all the way up. Like, what do you think? I was like, well, do you want to know the truth? He's like, yeah. He's like, well, you've got to kind of weigh what's the cost. It's like, we were working on things like his racket face at contact force. So what are you willing to pay to have that arm straight? Because in a junior sense, I could say, yeah, we have to work on that, but you're going to lose for the next month. You got to be okay with that. And the junior knows I have this huge, long career that I can get away with it. Adult, they may not want to do that. It's finding those kind of high leverage points to work on that are fundamentally strong, that allow them to do the things that get them to move through the level without completely sometimes having to overhaul everything.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of people are a victim of this. I can remember when I was a junior too, and like I started to get into this style of just like getting every ball back, waiting for mistakes to happen on the other side, and then I feel like that was just all results oriented because I wanted to just win.
Yeah,
and this is what you talked about, where you were process oriented, and that that's the way to improve, is to just kind of shove aside, if you will, the winning part, and just focusing on long term of where do you want to be later on, and like how do you want your game to be, and then you just focus on that. So that's really excellent, that I think all adult players should be doing. So I feel like when you were discussing like the this topic, like it seemed to more be on the technical side, but I'm curious if you've got strategy, technique, fitness, the mental game, like which ones of those, or which one are we supposed to be focusing on like the most if we're an adult player, like a 3-5 or so, and we want to move forward?
It's a really tough question, but I'm going to break it down this way, because they're all really important. And without some of the foundations of like having certain things, it's hard to build something else on it. So if you're a 3-5, let's say, and you're stuck, you're like, man, my game is just stuck here. What would be the first thing? First thing I would probably say is like, let's look at how consistent you are. How many balls can you make? Because if you can't make balls, then we can't even start there. And then I work on like, okay, how well do you place the ball? That's the next kind of waypoint. And then once we get to like, you can consistently make enough balls. And I don't mean like, hey, you need to make like 30 balls. If you can make 10 balls decently consistent, which if you know what to focus on, it's not super hard. Then it's like, okay, once I got the consistency and placement, I can start implementing some strategy. And I think one of the things, especially until you probably get, at least I think, to 4-0, strategy is more about execution than doing some elaborate plan to like manipulate the other player. I think so many times players are like, dude, okay, I need to do this like drop shot and lob. I'm like, no, you just need to get it in that spot a couple times and then run around and get it in that spot a couple times. And so we overcomplicate the situation. Most points are won because someone makes a mistake. And generally it's the person who's hitting the ball who's obviously making the mistake. And so I think until you get to like 4-0, learn certain patterns to use. Like have your patterns. Like I have my patterns that I can adjust for different styles that I play, but it's like they're like every time I know if I'm playing, unless you have a phenomenal backhand, I'm going to serve you out wide, run around inside out forehand. I'm going to punish that forehand for a while until I get my ball in the middle of the court. And then I practice these things. And so I think by understanding what you do best, you can then set up patterns that work best for you. And that trims down on all the things you need to practice. Because so many people are like, I got to practice all this. Like, well, your serve's okay, get solid on that, but you need to practice these other things to work with your patterns. And so you have this collection of patterns that you use, and you also know how to flex them around for players that are a little bit different. And that's what you wind up focusing on. Instead of, I think a lot of 3-5 go out and they practice like random stuff. Is like, okay, I got to practice this because this is this is this is this. Instead of going, what do you need to practice for your specific game? When you know that, it cuts down on a lot of having too many choices. You think you need to do this and this one. It's like, you just need to do that and that. So I think the more you can really cut down on the choices and narrow it down so you can practice those specific things, the better you're going to get at executing that and the better results you're going to have in a match. Because if you can execute a certain shot and make your opponent come up with winners, I mean, that's really tough. And I think that's what's important till you get to another level. And lastly, I would say this, the saying that comes to my mind is like, what got you here isn't maybe going to get you to the next point. And so a lot of times, like we were talking about with consistency, in the beginning, consistency is important, but consistency isn't going to just by itself get you to be a 4-0. So it's like, you got to work on the consistency, but that's not going to get you the next thing. The placement, the developing a weapon, developing all these things and stacking it on top. And that's how you break through to that 4-0, 4-5 level, because you have all these things put together.
Yeah, I love it. A lot of great stuff in there. I mean, generally it's like whenever people have too many things to decide on, they just decide on nothing and then no improvements are made. So, I mean, I really love this approach of basically, you're saying, figure out your game style, your strengths, and then create patterns based on that. And then that'll narrow down what you need to focus on or what you need to practice. And then I guess, with that, maybe if there's some patterns that you think would really benefit you, but then you like technically need to improve to be able to execute those, that's when you kind of put that in there, the technique development.
Totally. I think that's where the cycle comes, where you understand what your game is, what you want to do. You start practicing it. You go out and play a match. And then what's going to happen is you're going to either win or lose. If you're winning, those patterns are working. If you start losing, then you come back to the table and go, what happened? Did I not execute? Or did they do something that I wasn't prepared for? Which then in turn now like tells you what you need to practice on. And then you take those things and rehearse until you get those things right. And then you come up against something new. And that's the cycle. That's like what developing a player is helping them go through that cycle over and over again so you can get to higher and higher levels of tennis.
Yeah, for sure. Just curious, do you have your students like do any writing down or anything of like, notating their improvements? Because I feel like maybe, I don't know. I guess if it's really simplified, then you may not have to write it down, but maybe for some that would be helpful. I'm just curious of your approach.
Currently, no. I mean, juniors, I would maybe have them writing down. Adults, I haven't had lately. But in a sense, I've tried to keep everything really, really simple.
Yeah.
I like using analogies with technique, and my process of kind of teaching like singles, especially until you get to like the 4.0, 4.5 level, is pretty like it's a standard kind of thing where you have very few options, but you focus on executing those, and you have the ability to kind of blend it for your game. But it's mostly, I want to keep everything as simple as possible, because I think complexity just leads to more mistakes and more like options that you don't need.
Yeah, 100%. As far as the, so kind of to get into like your training style, I was wondering, what mix of like hand feeding versus live drills and other things, like I guess when you want to, let's say, establish or work on these patterns, like what's the best type of way to go about it in terms of like the actual training methods?
I usually use a mix of all, like hand feeding, racket feeding, and live. How it works is, for me, in a general sense, is like, first of all, if you have the technique, we're just going to assume you have the technique to hit the shot. Then I want to do some hand feeding to make sure you can execute the pattern. After that, I'll go to some feeding. But then right around feeding, or even around hand feeding, I think one really important thing is to add accountability. Because the number one thing I hear players say is like, I practice awesome. I did all these drills and it's so amazing. And then you go on a match and it's like, it didn't work. And I think one of the biggest issues with when you practice, if you don't practice like you're playing, then it's not going to show up. And what's the difference between you playing is that you're accountable to everything. The score keeps you accountable, and that creates pressure. And so when I'm hand feeding, it might be simple, like you have to hit 6 balls past the service line or whatever, depending on the level. I mean, if it's just in the beginning, I'm like, you have to hit 6 balls in that location. Then it might be you have to hit 6 balls in that location past the service line. And then I'm add some more movement to that hand feeding, but I'm slowly stacking on more and more pressure. And then I jump over to the other side of the net and do the same thing. So while I'm giving them just enough challenge, I'm also increasing the amount of pressure. So at the point where if we're doing a live ball situation, it may be like where it's like, hey, the goal might be just hypothetically, if you have to go 2 balls cross, then I hit one down the line, they're backhand down the line, and you get a short ball. If you miss any one of those balls, we stop, and then we do it over again. And so it's this constant thing of adding on enough accountability and pressure, because then when you go in a match, you're like, this is normal. I've been training to like hit the ball in, because I think a lot of times it's easy to go out, especially with an adult or somebody, or just as a coach, and you're like, oh, it's okay, you missed the ball, it's just a little wide, no big deal. But what happens is when they go on the match, the brain goes, well, I've been training like it's no big deal. Why should it be a big deal here? And so that's the difference of how you get the results in the match. It's like you have to train that way. You have to train with accountability. And there's different levels of accountability. So that's how I would go. It's like hand feeding with accountability, racket feeding with accountability, live ball with accountability. And I just keep stacking the accountability to it gets to a level where like, man, playing a match would be easier. So yeah.
Very nice. So when you get to that highest level of accountability and training, and then you shift to the match, like, would you say there's pretty much like a very small gap in that level, so that there's not a ton of like difference there where you can shift? Yeah. Yeah,
no, I think that's the whole idea, is like, instead of going from training where there's very little accountability to the match and there's huge leap, you're trying to stair step your student up to the here, or even like trying to get it even. And so you have that ability when you're feeding a point to them, because you can make it infinitely harder or more difficult than they might have to play, and say, okay, I'm going to bounce feed or topspin feed and move you back and move you in, and you have to make all the balls. And if you don't, we're going to keep going. Of situation where like the brain's going to go like this, and you have to do it with enough acuity not to try to break somebody. I think sometimes coaches get in there like, oh, you're going to run until you break. But it's just sensing where they are. And some players, they might get to that day, and you hang it up for that day. You come back and you start continuing. It's not like every day is just like this hardcore training where it's like, I'm going to kill my students, but they do feel the pressure, but they appreciate it because they feel like they're getting better. And I think the other thing is rewarding. Like if I go out and hit with a pro or something, and it's like hit cross courts, I've missed some, I made some, whatever, and you go home and you're like, okay, I did cross courts. But if like you hit with someone, you're like, I made this many balls, this situation, this many times, it helps your brain go, I accomplished something. I did something that you can tangibly say, I did this, compared to like, yeah, I hit cross courts. Going to a match, your brain is like, oh, well, I hit cross courts and half of them were out, half of them were in.
Right.
Compared to like, yeah, I've been doing this. I hit 30 balls in my last practice session, accountable. I can do this in a match. And so it helps bridge that gap.
Yeah, 100% there. When you were talking about like the hardcore training, just reminded me, do you know of David Goggins by any chance?
I love David Goggins.
Can't hurt me.
I feel like somebody told you to ask Kevin about David Goggins. I'm such a David Goggins fan.
Oh, you are awesome.
I just want to turn and be like,
yeah.
If you're not playing tennis, you're not hard.
That's right. Hard. Yeah. There was this clip of like a fan question where the fan question was like, hey, David, did you train today? And he like laughs hysterically. He's like, he asked me if I trained today. Like, because, he's hardcore. So, but yeah, Can't Hurt Me is a great book for sure. But sorry.
Yeah.
So slightly an aside, but it's relevant as well. So on the topic of being hardcore, actually, I'm curious to know what the highest level of training looks like, or what that accountability is, because, in my mind, I guess it's a practice match, but so is it pretty much just a practice match where, you win or lose the match, or is there anything else involved? Because I'm wondering if like students could, maybe they're playing that practice match and they're like, I guess they're not as intense because it's a practice match. So I'm wondering how the accountability should be in that, with that level.
I mean, there's so many things you can, depending on your kind of the how close the two people are, you can play for something. I mean, we either have kids play for something, play for lunch, put something. It doesn't have to be crazy. It's just, there has to be something that can be lost. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes people play practice matches and they walk away. It's like, okay, no big deal. I'll play you next week. Right. Compared to, we're playing for lunch. Like, hey, let's go out. We're going to play. Whoever loses buys the other person lunch. There's skin in the game. There's like something where like, man, so I think that's one thing. Sometimes we would make juniors, and this is hard. You play a set where you have to win 2 points for it to equal 1. And so it makes it infinitely longer, but it definitely can turn up your focus. And you have to kind of know also a little bit about yourself, like what's going to motivate you. But it definitely, in some sense, some sort of skin in the game you have to have, I think, to make a practice match accountable, because you could play a practice match and it means nothing, and so unless you have something that you feel like you can gain from winning this or lose from losing it, then, you're kind of like, I'll just walk away and play next week. So at the highest level of at least the juniors I've worked with in the past, that's the thing we started doing. It's like, but point for them, there's already skin in the game. There's status. It's like, who beat who? I don't want anybody to know I lost to that person. And so they've already kind of got to the point. It's like, man, I want to crush you, or I want the score to be like this. I'm supposed to kill this person. And it's like 5-4. Oh my God. There's all these different things that are showing up for them. Because they have this future ideal of what they want to accomplish and kind of the pecking order. But if you don't have that, it's like, create it for yourself. And it doesn't have to you could bring a Gatorade and like, hey, we're going to play for this Gatorade, whatever, just something.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know for a fact that you and Ian like would play for stacks of cash. Like, is that right? Stacks on stacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
you guys are ballers.
So yeah, we're both competitive. I mean, even if it wasn't like playing for something, it's just playing for pride. It's like, yeah.
I'm wondering though. You mentioned like the juniors who, like, I guess they don't want to lose to somebody and everything. for status purposes. Could that ever be a detriment? Because I remember when I was playing in juniors, and I would almost like I wouldn't want to play somebody, and I would be like afraid to lose to them. Like I don't know, is there like a difference there maybe in the approach? Like,
no, I think it's the same. I think the difference is coaching players, whatever level, because this happens for adults too. I mean, I know for sure. Talk to adults like, I don't want to lose, or ladies, I don't want to lose that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's at every level, and I think it's different at every level. With kids trying to separate what's going on, like their identity from tennis. Like if I lose that person, I'm an awful person. I'm an awful tennis player. Adults just, I mean, I don't know. I think it's the same way in the sense of just like looking past that. But I mean, it can be both good and bad. It could be motivate you, or it could completely kind of tear you down. And so I think it's really important to understand what does motivate you. I'm very motivated by the challenge. Mm-hmm. If I know there's something on the line, I perform better. I almost would jokingly, quick story. Whenever I play my roommate, and we were always playing for the line, like on our team, he'd call a ball out, and like, are you serious? That was so weird. He's like, dude, what are you talking about? So I completely knew. I was like, are you going to be like that? Are you going to really make that call? Okay, it's on. And talking about, and slightly it was to get in his head, but it's also like, you know what? I've got something, it's on, it's something to play for. So I know that for me, that's not for everybody, but it's just like finding that trigger and knowing what that is for you is super important. What gets you to compete at that higher level? Some people are a little bit more up, they need more intensity, and some people don't.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. You got to really learn what ticks. And I mean, relatedly, I was listening to Tim Ferriss, who's a great podcaster, and he was just saying as well, like, he used to, for example, like get pissed off, like certain things would trigger him to get really mad and all that, but he had to learn like what those triggers actually were, examine them, and then figure out like how they're, what they produce in him, and then how to maybe mitigate. So just generally, being introspective is really helpful. Curious too, maybe one last question on adult development for now, at least, is what mix in your mind of competition versus training is ideal, and do we need to avoid big tournaments like when we're making a big change?
This is always a tough one because it's different for different people, and it's different for your personality. I think this is where it still comes up because even working at Essential Tennis, we would talk to people. And sometimes there's this idea of like, okay, you need to just stop playing everything. You need to just like do some progressions. And then it's like, no, you don't. And so I think first you start with where's your joy. If you're the type of player that enjoys playing, don't put yourself in a situation where you can't play. Like, so maybe tone down what you're going to work on to a small enough chunk where you can still go play and it's not going to bother you, but you can enjoy what brings you joy in tennis. Because the whole idea is, at least I think for a lot of adults, is they enjoy tennis. I enjoy tennis. And so I want to feel that enjoyment. But if I'm taking out of that better to improve, to somehow go back and enjoy where I always enjoying, it's so that was always the thing I think we started with for after a while of talking to people is like, where's your enjoyment? Is this big enough of where you're going to make this change, but you're going to have to maybe take some time off for something and come back and maybe be better? Is that going to be okay? And so you have to weigh that for every player. But definitely, I think is starting with where's your joy. If you understand where your joy is, if you like playing, then make some smaller changes and still play, or maybe tone down how much you play. If it's something you really need to know you need to do, maybe take a couple weeks off and then work on it if you're the type of person who loves working on stuff. I love both. I love working on stuff, but I ultimately want to work on it to have it show up in a match. So I want to compete too. But I do get that, sometimes you do have to like really work on stuff. I switched from a two-handed backhand to a one-handed backhand. And that was kind of just rough. But in my mind, I was like, I don't care. I was okay with competing and losing. And so I would lose to everybody, but I was just like hitting one-handed backhands all the time until it got better.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I think was it Sampras, or I was interviewing keep forgetting all my guests, but it might have been Jeff Salzenstein, who like he played Sampras or something like, Jeff, friends with him. And so basically Sampras, like he lost really bad. He was in the process of switching to a one-hander, but like he just smirked at his opponent because, he didn't really care. Like he knew that was going to bring him to the next level. So it's kind of good to hear that mentality there. So curious about the serve. I mean, I was looking at my survey results just on like what people want to see on this upcoming summit that's in mid-April, and they were a huge amount of requests on the serve. So I was wondering, you're obviously extremely experienced both online and, at clubs and teaching on the court. And you see a lot of serves from adult players and other players. So what part of the serve do you see most adult players struggle with? And then what's the solution to that particular problem?
Oh, it would definitely be the grip. Having where they have the usually like it's like a Eastern forehand to semi-Western forehand is going after the serve.
Those pancakes, yum.
Pancakers. Gotta love those pancakers.
That's right.
I love pancakes.
Me too.
But I think the thing is, first of all, where I found success is first of all explaining to adults why. I think this is something maybe some coaches it's like, oh, you need to switch this grip. And they're like, okay. And you put them in a continental grip, they look at you like, how the heck is this thing supposed to hit the ball?
Right.
But explaining why, like, should have had one prepared, but I got my son's little racket out here.
Nice.
But it's just explaining that, like, okay, the whole problem with the pancake or grip is that as the racket approaches or the strings approach the ball, most of the strings are pointing up, and so it leaves very little margin for a player to have success creating spin. And then explain like, okay, so obviously, but it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. If I never play tennis, I'm like, okay, look, I want the ball to go that way. I want the strings to point that way.
Right.
This should make sense. And in the beginning it does. And then people are like, dude, but the balls, I want to hit it that way, but the strings are going that way. That doesn't make sense. But then when you start showing them how to do it. And so my biggest thing when I get a pancaker in, usually I don't switch it all the way to continental because that's just too big of a switch, like we were talking about. Halfway, probably to somewhere like a soft Eastern, they can still hit a slice serve. And so my biggest thing is getting them actually to grip up with the racket. If it was a full-size racket, we'd still grip up like this, go up to the net, and I just have them brush the ball. And usually everybody can do that. So if you grip up, they're just brushing the ball and they get the sensation like, whoa, I can swing this way and the ball goes that way. And I think that's the other big thing. It's just like players not used to having a different swing path from where the racket face is facing, meaning that they're used to like, okay, the racket and the strings go all together. So that doesn't make sense that I'm going to swing this way, but the ball's going to go that way. They think, oh, the ball's going to go this way. And so once you get them to understand that they can swing this way and create spin, but as long as they have the strings facing this way, it'll go in the direction they want. They start developing this motion to brush the ball, which means now if you were in that pancake grip, it gets really hard to brush the ball this way. And they start buying in because it's like, oh, I understand this. And you've given me a tool by gripping up to do it. And then I'll literally have them working their way back from probably 2 or 3 feet away from the net, hitting the box, and we'll just keep going back. By the time we get to the service line, I have them start gripping down the racket. They're doing the same thing. We work our way back. We keep adjusting the racket face, and it gives them this sensation and awareness of what my racket face is doing and what my path needs to be. And so when you do that and you work them back, they're like, oh, and then they'll start self-correcting because they're like, I've had a lady and she was like, oh yeah, I can't, they'll understand now. It's like, I can't create spin this way.
You're going to break your wrist over there.
It's like, oh, it's not working. But then they'll make the correction themselves because they're like, okay, well, I need the racket to go this way now because I know this is the spin I want. And so that's probably my biggest thing where I probably focus on a lot if they have the pancake grip, is getting them to start right up at the net or brushing. And I don't even care about the follow through. I'm not even going to pay a lot of attention to this until we start getting more comfortable. And probably around the service line or a little bit before that, I'll start saying, okay, now you feel comfortable. Now it needs to come back around to your finish. I just want them to get that sensation of spin. and then start building on that. And then they go back to the baseline, and their whole paradigm of the serve switches. And then they have this ability like going, oh, so I can place it just by adjusting racket face, but I can have my racket path create spin. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing where I see players really struggle with, but it's a big opportunity if they can switch that. That's a huge opportunity that you can start learning that idea of the concept of the path being different from where the racket face is, in a sense.
Yeah, I love it. And again, the hero here is progression, just like how we talked about it previously with, introducing different levels of accountability gradually. You've got this here where you go up to the net, you choke up on the racket with the continental grip, and then you feel out how it actually works and the explanation of why is achieved. I've got a nice dad joke for you, Kevin. It's not a question, actually. I'll just say it. I like my serve grip like my breakfast. Continental. Booyakasha. I messed up the booyakasha. Damn it. But anyway, I hope you like that.
I like it. I'm gonna use it.
Yeah, and it's healthy too, man. You get the fruits and the bagels. Anyway, too many carbs. I'm just going off right now. Yeah, I appreciate that. No, but I love it. I like it. Thank you. Appreciate it. So as far as the serve, there's different serve types, so if you were to have your students, let's go with adult players, them to focus on one type of serve, that you think would get them the most ROI, return on investment, like what serve would you say they should focus on?
Honestly, I would choose probably a slice. I would choose if there's something within a slice placement, not even power. The reason I would choose a slice is because generally, it's a lot easier for them to get this swing path going from here. So kind of hard on the camera, flat going this way, slice here, and then kick going this way. The more the racket has to go away from the direction of where you were going to hit the ball, the harder is the time. Hence, people having harder times with hitting a kick serve. Slice is kind of in between the flat. And the other thing with the flat is like, until they learn to create a little brush, generally the flat just turns into super flat. Instead of like flat with, being able to add a little spin. And so I would say the slice and then focus on racket face angle because it's hard. I think a lot of people are caught up and who doesn't love hitting an ace or hitting the ball hard? So everybody wants to hit the ball hard, but the reality of
Just kidding.
The reality of it is, but this is kind of the thing. It's like there's a time for it, but the reality of it, it's hard to do consistently. And so what happens is your first serve percentage drops and you're just dinking in and getting in second serves. If you're already not confident in your first serve, then some person's just going to throttle your second serve.
Yeah.
But with that, you can have a pretty fast first serve, but you can place it. And placing it is pretty much, as I've gotten older playing, I only work on like placement is my big thing. It's like if I hit a big first serve, it's because I'm just trying to mix it up every once in a while just to keep you honest, but hey, fool you. But it's all about placing it because I want the ball to come back in a way that I can set up, whether it be doubles or singles. If I can place the ball out wide in singles and set up my forehand, that's what I want. If I can place the serve down the tee, solid slice, and set my partner up, that's what I want, compared to trying to go for winners. So that's where I would start with.
I really like that. A lot of great points there because I think conventionally, most people may think that the topspin serve could be the default there. Obviously it has its merits. You got the height and consistency. Maybe it's easier to get that serve in more often than, but generally, of course, the height is more present there. But like you said, I had the toughest time learning the kick serve for the reasons you mentioned. I also found that, I was not staying sideways long enough. So a lot of, more complications with the topspin serve than the slice serve. So I think it's a great point. It's easier to learn for sure. And those wide serves are very tough. Especially against a player like me who has like a little bit more on the Western side, not fully, but that forehand grip, it's tough to return balls out wide. No. And you set up the court, you're off, the returner's off the court. So that's a very good choice. Yeah.
I think that's also just a mentality switch because it's, when I talk to some players like, ooh, I'm going to hit this ace. I'm like, and then what? I'm like, what do you mean?
Points over, man.
Like they don't think about the next shot. It's just like, I'm going to hit it hard. It's like, What are you going to do after that? You mean I got to plan that? And so I think when you start thinking 2 or 3 shots ahead, and it changes your mentality. You don't get frozen when like you hit the big ace and it comes back. Yeah. You're like, oh shoot. You start expecting things to come back, and you want it to come back so you can do the next step. And if it doesn't come back, that's a bonus. But it's like you put your mind in a place of expecting what could happen and what might happen based on what I'm going to do. And so it's a much easier way to kind of think about like and anticipate things. And I think at every level, you just have to start doing that more and more. I played a guy who was like really good, and it's like I hit a shot. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not coming back. And I'm like, oh shoot, that came back. And so at that level, still like you gotta like think that everything's gonna come back and have that mentality.
Yeah, I played really well that time. That was a good one. No, that wasn't me. I'm just playing. I don't want to take the credit. So
you can take the credit.
Oh, thank you.
Now we gotta actually play.
Oh, what? No, yeah, we actually.
Now we're gonna have
I would love to play.
On. I can't believe you hooked me on that one.
That was out. Sorry, man. That was out.
Okay, it's on.
It's on like Donkey Kong. Mm-hmm.
It's on.
All right, that's fine. Yeah. No, actually, that would be amazing. Yeah, like it's really cool when you see the content creators, like obviously Ian. You know, you played Ian like on one of those videos. Like it's pretty cool. I hope we can do that at some point. I think there was also the doubles match that you had against Scott and Nate. That was really fun.
Scott and Nate. Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. I absolutely played. Here's the inside thing of it. I played awful. I did 2 things really well, which was I served really well.
Yes, you did.
I couldn't hit a return. I don't know if he put that. It was like I was so bad at returning. I did like if you've ever watched the what's the Wolf of Wall Street where he's like doing the chant. I was like, I got to make this return, and I finally made one. I was like, yes. But yeah, no, it was a fun match. Those guys were cool. It was we'd have to do it again sometime.
Yeah. But yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it's it's a cool thing about the tennis community in general. Like we help market each other to a large degree, and like we collaborate, and like I'm glad it's like that.
Yeah, it is. It was super cool.
Yeah, so hopefully when this when people can travel more, we can try to do something like that. It'd be really cool. So just a little bit on strategy. I'm curious what because obviously we have to know our game, our strengths, and then build patterns like we mentioned earlier in the show. But what are some biggest strategic mistakes, perhaps they're quite simple in nature, that people can be more cognizant about and try and eliminate? And we can go with singles for this.
Okay. If we go past obviously your patterns. I think the idea of making sure that you're kind of not losing points and your opponent has to win points. That idea is so, so important. Because I've had so many matches where the person's really hot and I'm not winning per se, but I'm not necessarily losing unless they're up like 3-2. And I'm like, but you almost get this feeling of the match like, you just got to keep making balls. They're playing way too well. And then there's this point where it's like, you dig out a ball, they miss it, and you're like, that's it. And it's like, oh, it's just like completely the dam breaks open and arrows start flying. And I think a lot of players don't realize the undercurrent of matches and the momentum. I think if you could understand momentum, I've been in matches where I was up 3-1. I'm like, I'm about to lose because it's like I'm playing really, really well, and I'm like, I don't know if I can sustain this.
Right.
You kind of look over them like they're just making balls, and it's just it's just gonna catch up to you. And there's been matches where I've been down and go, I just gotta like stick with it, and generally, good things happen. But this idea of making sure you're making your opponent make really good shots. It's just so hard. It's so hard to hit winners on purpose. It's so hard to run over and hit a cross-court winner when someone's coming to net. And I don't think people give enough credence to that. They don't like really focus on that. It's like, I have to hit the winner. I have to like make sure they don't get to the ball. And they don't realize how much pressure it is to put on somebody to go like, you have to come up with a shot every time. And so that's I would say like mentality, looking like just straight on patterns. It really depends on your game. It really depends on what you like doing. But I would say Craig O'Shaughnessy, I think, talks about this, like really start focusing on how you set up your first 4 strikes or 2 strikes of the balls. The first 4 balls are like, what is it, 67% of points or something, I think he said. And so what that means is you need to really be good at your serve and your serve plus 1. It's like, spend a lot of time just like serve plus 1, return. And so what a plus 1 is, if you're not familiar with that term, is serving and then what you're going to do with that next ball. So that's why the serve, like we talked about, has a purpose. You're serving out wide to get the forehand and then execute that ball, because Craig O'Shaughnessy says, I think something like 67% of points are won or lost within the first 4 strikes of the ball. And that's the serve, return, first forehand, or first ground stroke dead, and that's why I think for me, I'm generally subscribed to like, you got to go out and be able to hit like 40 balls in a row. Like that's like, I think it was like 7-8% of the percentage of points.
Right.
Focus on the biggest chunk and how you can increase your placement and increase the ability for you to set up that next shot. I think if players did more of that, they would be more successful, but it's just something so different. Like, when's the last time you went out with a coach and you go serve plus 1? It's like, oh, we got 10 minutes left. Hey, why don't you hit some serves? Let's wrap this up with some serves.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that should be brought more to the forefront of your practice matches, is like serve plus 1. And you can do it with yourself. I've practiced or had players practice where they can either serve and keep a ball in their pocket, or they can shadow the serve and then toss the ball and work on that next ball, just to start getting that mentality. And it's like serve and then plus 1.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think so. It seemed like Craig's data, if I remember correctly, was pretty singles heavy. Like, I guess, do you think the same principles pretty much apply to doubles? It seems like it would, right?
Honestly, I wouldn't know. I don't want to say if it does. I think doubles is different because your potential plus 1 is your partner. And you serve and your partner's that kind of plus 1. So it's like you're serving in a sense to have them create the plus 1. And so that's how I would think about it for doubles.
Yeah. That makes sense, man. That makes sense. Yeah, Kevin, it's been a great conversation. I know, we've both got stuff to do and all that. But I don't know how much you read or have read, like, for tennis books or books in general, but I wanted to ask you of 3 books that you would gift to a friend to help them become a better tennis player. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a tennis book. It can be any kind of book.
That's deep. Got me by surprise. 3 books. They don't have to be tennis.
Yeah, they could be, but they don't have to be.
Okay, so I'm gonna be all geeky on you.
All right.
So one book that has nothing to do with tennis, but there's some principles in it that I really, really like, and you could probably find them around, not necessarily that book, but is Poor Charlie's Almanac. And so it's a business book, and it's the business book of Charlie Munger, who is Warren Buffett's partner. And so what he talks about in there, just to sum it all up, because they're like, whoa, how are we going to find anything related there in tennis, is mental models, and how he kind of uses these models to filter out things. Mental models I find really, really interesting that can be applied to tennis is like things like inversion, the 80-20 principle. I like literally have them written on my wall. What else can we? Sunk costs. I think it's like fallacy. So what 80-20 principle states is that 80% of your results come from 20% of the things you're doing. So I would look for that in my game. Like if I'm playing a match and I have a chance to review it, I would go through the stats or figure out and go, what's the 20% of things that are winning me 80% of my points? I know that. That's my forehand. It's going to be serve and forehand. That's going to win me 80% of my points. And then you could even take it and be a little bit almost like recursive about it. It's like, what's the 80-20 of the 80-20? And go even deeper. But I would just start with the surface. The other part is something where he always says if you want to solve a problem, you must first invert it. And so what that means is solve the problem by asking, how would you turn the problem on its head? So it's like, hey, Mirabon, you want to become a great tennis player, right? So I would say, Mirabon, how would you become a horrible tennis player? What are the things you would do to become a horrible tennis player? And so it was like, well, I wouldn't make balls. And so, well, I would make sure I don't run for balls or I'm not fit. So all these things you come up with it are the list of things you got to make sure you stop doing. That becomes your stop doing list. And so a lot of times when we think about the goal, we think about like, hey, I want to go accomplish this. I want to hit a bigger forehand. Yeah, I'm going to hit a bigger forehand. But you never stop doing the stop doing list. So you continue to try to go for the goal, but you're still having all those bad habits. If you do just the stop doing list, there's a bigger chance of you probably hitting your success than if you try to just go for the goal, forgetting the stop doing list, if that makes any sense. And so there's a myriad of all these different like mental models he uses that I apply to my teaching. I apply to like when I try to make content about asking myself different questions and looking at from different angles to find out answers. Trying to think of another book. And yeah, probably most of these aren't very business or tennis books. Principles by Ray Dalio.
Great book.
Another business book. Yeah. I like how he talks about pain. What is it? Pain and reflection equals evolution.
Yeah.
And so when you look at your tennis game, it's like, what's causing you the most pain? And like going in that direction and figuring out how can I deal with that? Because that's the only way you're going to get to the next level. It's like solving that pain point, and that pain is a signal. Don't take it as something personal, but solving that pain point and moving forward with it. So if you suck at volleys, you might just really need to like break it down and figure out like, how can I get better? Or at least bring up that part of my game. He talks about, they both talk about it. You'll see a lot of similarities, first principles. And I think this is huge. Like, what's the first principles of tennis? And I love asking people this. Like, what would be, Mirbon, you're on the spot now. What's the 2 or 3 most important things about hitting a tennis ball?
Oh, wow. Okay. Positioning, using your kinetic chain, and focusing on, this is kind of 2, but like focusing on the ball plus like what your opponent is doing kind of thing.
Okay. So I would dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And the whole question is like, why? You would ask yourself why. And what I've come up with is like the kinetic chain is important, but the racket face, like the interaction between the ball and the racket face is probably what I think is one of the most important things, because that will signal or tell the ball what to do. Like you can have a broken down ghetto kinetic chain.
That's true.
The racket face will go where you want it to go. And so it's like, if you want to increase your consistency, it really comes down to your racket face. Like, even if you don't have a great kinetic chain. Now, if you want to have more racketed speed, that's when we start adding in the kinetic chain. But so I'll ask players, like, they'll hit a ball in the net. I'm like, why'd the ball go in the net? And they're like, well, my shoulders or my hips were like weird. And I'm like, and I'll literally turn backwards, hit a ball under my legs and hit it. And they're like, okay, so yeah, your shoulders were completely jacked there, and it had nothing to do with what the ball is going to do.
Right.
And then I get them to break it down. I'm like, oh shoot, my racket face. Now, do I think the hips and stuff and everything else adds into the racket face? Yeah, it relates to that. So how if I'm thinking about, I need to get this racket face, well, your body's going to have to be in position. Your kinetic chain is going to have the timing to get there, but it starts with that. And so that's why I say, like, looking through like those mental models of like first principles. What's the kind of, I think Elon Musk calls it reasoning from like the cause instead of analogy. So, and I think that's really important in tennis because there's so many things that get just passed down. It's like, well, good players do this because they're that. And you're like, no one ever kind of asks the question, because you're like, oh, this person told me they're really good, so that must be it. And it's really easy to get caught up in that instead of going like, why? And they're like, but asking that and going deeper. And so if you're ever in a tennis lesson, ask why. Like, ask why, and ask why more than once. Because tennis coaches, and myself included sometimes, it's a good exercise for people to ask why. And then they ask why again, because it really makes you understand if they understand what's going on, and maybe even helps the coach go like, I need to figure that out. But I think those are, 2 books right there. I'm trying to think of it, just tennis. I mean, it's the classic, The Inner Game of Tennis. I always like that one. It's a great mental book about how to communicate with yourself, how to kind of like put yourself in that kind of flow state that I find is super, super important.
These are really good books. And I think this, one of the best summarizations of the books as well that I've had. A lot of great stuff in here, and everybody can check out the show notes page for links to all of these books. Sweet. One last substantive question I think is if you could write a message on a billboard in the most highly trafficked city where it's erected on that particular road, what would you say, or what would you have the billboard say? Deep again.
Deep, so deep, Mirvan.
I know.
Live in the present.
I like it. Why?
I think for tennis, if you want to play your best, you have to be in the present. And if you want to enjoy life, you have to be in the present. And what that means is we spend so much of our time thinking about the things we want or the things that have happened to us, and we're not in the actual moment of living life. Whether it be on the tennis court, like you play a point, you're like, man, that forehand sucked. And you're walking up to the service line like, oh God, I hope I don't do that again. And then you miss it because you're not even there. And then you're like, God, see, I did that again. And literally you're bouncing back and forth between like, oh, this is going to suck. I'm going to lose. And see all the shots I hit. And instead of just going, you know what? This is a new moment right here now. I'm just going to stay here and just be in that moment. And it's a constant thing that I try to maybe bring back, is like take a moment when I come home, and it's like I get out of the car and it's like I stop and I look up at the stars for like 30 seconds just to be present. Just because time is short, and you can spend your whole life kind of thinking about all the things you want and not enjoying the things you have.
Yeah, definitely. Stay in the present. It's a great one. I also feel like you could be a great voice actor. Like, I really like that whiny voice that you just did. That was really good. That was really good.
I'm gonna have to listen to it later, because I'm like, whoa, what's he talking about?
Yeah. Just like when you were like, oh, I missed the forehand. I don't know. I enjoyed that. I don't know why.
Okay.
But
save that one.
Yes. So Kevin, you obviously do a lot of great work with Total Tennis Domination. You're around like, I forget, like over 40 some thousand subscribers. And people really need to check out your stuff. I mean, as I mentioned in the intro, you've been on the tennis summits too and done some great presentations there. So where can people, check out your stuff, follow you, and so forth?
Definitely at totaltennisdomination.org, and obviously on YouTube. That's where I release YouTube videos. I'm in the process of doing a lot of different stuff. I think it was really cool that the subject matter of kind of getting stuck between 3-0 and 3-5 is something I really want to focus on, just because in recent of coming back to Oklahoma, I worked with those players so much, and it's like glaringly obvious, like, okay, like so many of them, it's like the same problem over and over again, technically, strategically, and just needing to know, like, what do I need to work on at this level, and then this level and this level, and creating a map for people of how to move through it. So it's not this kind of like you hit that 3-0 and it's like you're in a dark room and you're like, just like, where's the door? Right. Where's the 3-5-4-0 door? So yeah, that's what I've kind of in the lab working on creating. Yeah.
Very good stuff. Any social media profiles that you...
Yeah, Facebook group. If you look us up on Facebook and Instagram, we're going to get the Instagram going. The Gram's got to pick up some steam. Got to get the Gram going.
Get on the stories, those reels, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the Gram. I'm going to have to take some Gram lessons.
That's right. A gram at a time. Sorry. Okay, I got
This is good. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, dad jokes, man. I love them. Awesome, man. Well, I mean, this has been really, really great, and I really do appreciate your time a lot. And just look forward to connecting in the future very soon. But everybody go to totaltennisdomination.org. Also, Total Tennis Domination on YouTube. You will thank yourself if you check out the videos. They're really good. I've always been impressed with Kevin's work, and Megan's too. For sure. For sure. So yeah, Kevin, that's it, I guess, for this episode. episode, but I really appreciate you coming on and look forward to chatting again soon.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I appreciate your time and letting me come on and talk to the peeps.
That's right. Spreading the knowledge. We appreciate that.
Spreading the knowledge, dropping it.
That's right. Dropping it like it's hot. Great song.
I like it.
All right. We'll end on that rap reference there on a tennis podcast. All right. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mirban. Take care.
Thanks, you too. All right. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Coach Kevin Garlington. And if you want to check out any of the resources that Kevin mentioned, then just check out the show notes page. Or you can go to tennisfiles.com/184 for this particular episode, or tennisfiles.com/podcast to check out all the episodes. And again, Kevin's website is totaltennisdomination.org. So that's a great one to check out, or you can type in Total Tennis Domination in YouTube. If you enjoyed this podcast and you're finding value and tips to help you improve your game, then I would really, really appreciate it if you would leave a review for the Tennis Files podcast. And you can do that by going to tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts with an S at the end. That would be the best place to leave a review. But alternatively, if you don't have Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review in your podcast app of choice. I love reading your reviews and figuring out what it is that I may be doing well on the show and what it is that I can improve upon. So just rate me at 20 stars. Just kidding. It only goes up to 5. Yeah, so there's that. Again, would really appreciate a review. Thanks so much. And I'll leave you with a quote, as I often love to do at the end of the show. And this one is by Henry Ford. And Mr. Ford said, "Most people get ahead during the time that others waste." There's a lot of time wasting going on. I know, because I do it myself sometimes, a lot less than before, but it still happens. And it's, you don't beat yourself up when it happens, but you just strive to improve and do better the next day, and really just maximize the time you have so that you can maximize your true potential, so you're not disappointed at the end at all the things you could have accomplished in your tennis game and otherwise. Alrighty then. One of my favorite quotes from whatever movie that was. Pet Detective, maybe? I don't know. Not super strong on the movie suit, but with that, again, I hope that you all are doing well and staying safe and getting to play some tennis. The snow is coming down this evening as I record this outro for you all in the Maryland area. So that's pretty cool to see, but it's kind of hard to play outside now. So anyways, have a great one. Looking forward to producing many more episodes, knock on wood, for you. And we've got some great ones coming up. So hope you enjoyed this one and got a lot of value from it. And have a wonderful week. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is Mirban Aranshad signing out.